Season 4, Episode 7, Why Portfolios Fail from Complexity. Up to this point in the season, we've been exploring how portfolios function as machines. Capital has jobs. Different parts of the system perform different roles. Growth expands the system. Income supports life. Stability absorbs shocks. And during the transition stage, the machine must gradually begin carrying real financial weight. But there is another force that quietly undermines many portfolios: complexity. At first glance, complexity can seem impressive. A portfolio with many strategies, many asset classes, many funds, many moving parts. It can feel sophisticated, well diversified, carefully engineered. But there is an important difference between complexity and resilience, and many portfolios quietly cross that line without the investor realizing it. To understand why, imagine any machine that performs a critical function: an airplane, a water system, an electrical grid. These systems are designed with extraordinary care, but the goal is not to make them complicated. The goal is to make them reliable. Every additional component introduces the possibility of failure. Every additional interaction introduces new dependencies. And as complexity increases, so does fragility. Portfolios behave in the same way. Each investment adds another moving part, another stream of information, another decision to monitor, another reaction the investor must interpret. At first, this feels manageable, but over time the system becomes harder to understand, harder to maintain, and harder to operate during periods of stress. This is where the real danger of complexity appears. Not in normal conditions, but during difficult ones. When markets decline, when economic conditions become uncertain, when headlines create fear or urgency. At those moments, investors must make decisions quickly and with incomplete information. And complex systems are very difficult to manage under pressure. A complicated portfolio creates too many questions. Which assets should be adjusted? Which positions matter most? Which strategies interact with each other? What happens if one part of the system fails? Instead of clarity, the investor experiences confusion. And confusion often leads to poor decisions. Selling too quickly, changing strategies mid-cycle, or abandoning the system entirely. This is why portfolio failure often has less to do with market performance and more to do with behavioral stress. The system becomes too complicated for the investor to trust. And when trust disappears, discipline usually follows. Even well-designed strategies can collapse if they are too complex for the human operating them. Simplicity, by contrast, creates strength. Simple systems are easier to understand, easier to maintain, and easier to trust when markets become turbulent. The investor can see clearly how the parts interact. They can recognize when something is behaving normally, and they can remain patient when patience matters most. This does not mean portfolios should be simplistic. Different forms of capital still have different roles: growth, income, stability, optionality. But those roles should be implemented with as little structural complexity as possible. The goal is not minimalism for its own sake. The goal is durability, a machine that continues functioning without constant adjustment. In fact, one of the quiet truths of investing is that the most durable portfolios often appear surprisingly simple: a limited number of high-quality assets, clear roles within the system, and a structure that can be understood at a glance. These portfolios may not feel exciting, but they are far easier to operate over decades. And investing is ultimately a long-term endeavor. Once we accept that simplicity improves durability, another question naturally appears: how simple should a portfolio actually be? How many moving parts can a human realistically manage over long periods of time? That question leads us to one of the most practical ideas in portfolio design: a structural constraint known as the 20-slot framework. Because even the best architecture must respect a simple reality. Human attention is limited, and the systems we build must fit within those limits.